I have often wondered how to explain what unfolded between my father and me, and even now the words do not come easily. They feel like delicate threads I am afraid to pull too hard, because each thread holds a memory, and each memory carries a weight I still struggle to hold without trembling. My father was the figure who shaped me more than any other person on this earth, the one who seemed to understand me even when I could not express myself well. For so long I believed that if anyone could see through my quietness, my reservations, or my stubbornness, it would be him. He stood as my compass, my certainty, the one whose presence grounded me when the world pressed too loudly against my chest. But time has a curious way of reshaping truths we once thought permanent. Slowly, subtly, small misunderstandings grew into larger shadows, and the companionship we once carried so naturally began to weaken like fabric worn thin from use. There was not one moment that fractured us, no single argument that split our paths into two. It was a collection of them, scattered across years like shards of glass that neither of us wanted to step on but somehow always did. Pride curled between us in ways neither of us intended. His love was protective and firm, guided by what he believed was best for me. My hope was to carve my own way in the world, a path that did not reject his guidance but sought space to breathe. Somewhere between those two desires, our voices ceased reaching one another. Looking back, I wish I had listened more carefully. I wish I had explained myself without the tremble of defensiveness. I have replayed so many moments in my mind, moments when the right word, or even a calmer breath, might have changed the direction of our story. But human beings are not flawless, even when they love each other. Especially then. When emotions run deep, control becomes slippery, and even the purest intentions can warp into something unrecognizable. Whether I like it or not, some memories remain fragile to revisit. There is a particular pain in realizing that the love of someone you treasured felt less encompassing, less steady than you imagined as a child. But love, with all its weight and its warmth, still lives in me no matter how far apart we drift, even in silence, even in disappointment, even when I tell myself I should let go. My respect for him has never vanished. My gratitude remains a quiet undercurrent that no argument could erase. And when the nights are long and my worries grow too heavy, the thought that time reconciles even the deepest fractures gives me a strange, gentle comfort. I like to believe that one day we will sit together again, letting the years wash over us, allowing the wounds to soften as shared memories rise to the surface. Memories of laughter, of ordinary days, of all the things we built long before any resentment took root. Until then, I hold on to the hope that when the moment arrives for me to truly mourn the parts of us that have been lost, I will do it with strength, with tenderness, with the full honesty that healing requires. After all, he is my father. Nothing, not distance, not silence, not time, can change the truth that I will always be the child who once trusted the world because I trusted him. When I was younger, I did not fully understand the depth of my father's love. It showed itself not in dramatic declarations but in the practical, consistent things. The nights he stayed awake when I was sick, the sacrifices he made without announcing them, the way he carried our family's weight even when the strain left marks on him that I was too young to notice. He never needed to raise his voice for me to understand his expectations. I am the kind of person who quietly depends on structure, on someone to anchor me when I drift too far into my mind, and he somehow sensed that. His guidance was never loud, it was in the subtleties he watched so closely. He noticed when I moved through days without purpose, when weariness dimmed my spirit, when I pretended I was fine but was anything except. His love was the firm but gentle push urging me to take initiative, to rise from my hesitation. As I grow older, wisdom unfolds slowly, revealing layer by layer the countless facets of his affection. Many of them were shaped by the difficulties he lived long before I arrived in this world. Strength is embedded in everything he does, but woven into that strength is a vulnerability he would never openly admit. A hope that he has prepared me well enough to stand on my own, Even in our disagreements, I recognize that his words are rooted in concern, in that instinctive parental desire to shield what is most precious. Sometimes his love feels like a protective circle surrounding me when I falter. Other times it feels like being pushed into unfamiliar territory so I can learn to trust myself. But no matter how confusing those moments are, his love has never disappeared. It remains steady and unwavering, whether I am close to him or painfully distant. Even when our conversations collapsed into silence, even when I walked away with my emotions tangled, I knew he would still be there, just beyond reach, ready to catch me if I fell. Many people might be surprised to know that beneath my composed exterior lies a history far messier and more human than they imagine. So let me begin with something that still stings to admit. 2 years ago, during a Thanksgiving dinner that was supposed to be warm and simple, my father lost his temper. It was one of those moments that begins quietly, almost invisibly, and then unfolds into something impossible to stop. If that gives you any indication of the direction this story takes, let me tell you that what happened that night was unlike anything I had seen from him. Growing up, he was the one who taught me how to repair old things rather than discard them, including the small car we once worked on together for weeks. He attended every activity he could, no matter how tired he was. The man at that dinner table felt like a stranger wearing my father's face. And before any misunderstanding takes hold, I do not tell this to paint him as someone unkind. I share it because it is part of the truth that shaped us. I can still remember the mornings we spent by the lake, fishing in a quiet that felt safe. I cannot pinpoint exactly when everything shifted. Perhaps change happens that way, imperceptibly at first, then all at once. What used to soothe me now carries a heaviness I never expected, and although I wish I could erase the moment everything broke open that night, I cannot. The truth is, my father believed I had failed him in ways I never intended. He said words I was too stunned to respond to, words that etched themselves into my memory with a sting I still feel. He told me I had never been the child he hoped for. He told me the path I chose, my work, my dreams, my independence, was far from the life he once imagined for me. He wanted me to follow him, to inherit the responsibilities he had spent years building, to step into his world without hesitation. Hearing that cut through me in a way I did not know how to process. Even now, I can still feel the echo of that night when I let myself fall into the memory. It has been months since we last spoke. I have drafted messages I never sent, held birthday cards that remain unsigned on my desk, stared at his contact on my phone with fingers too heavy to move. On some evenings, when I leave the studio, I pass by his house. His truck is always parked in the same place, and I find myself wondering if he is inside watching the old films he used to enjoy, the same ones I pretended not to like but secretly found comforting. I tell stories about family and dreams, yet behind the camera a fracture has grown wider than I ever anticipated. Yes, I miss him, but I also feel anger rise within me when I revisit that moment, an anger sharp enough to make me look away from anything that reminds me of him. Many of you noticed that I stopped speaking about family gatherings. You saw me bury myself in work. Now you understand the reason. And this, I suppose, is the beginning of what I need to say. An opening into the story of what has been unfolding quietly, invisibly, in the background of my life. There is a strange loneliness that settles in the spaces left behind when someone you love becomes distant. At first it feels temporary, like something that will pass if you give it enough time, enough quiet, enough distance for the air to clear. But then the silence grows familiar, and you start to wonder if it has become a place the two of you now inhabit separately without meaning to. I kept telling myself that if I focused on my responsibilities, if I filled my days with purpose, I could avoid the ache of thinking about him. But absence has its own voice. Even when you try to outrun it, it echoes behind you, steady and patient. As I stood in front of the cameras and spoke confidently about goals, progress, and the beauty of shaping one's own journey, part of me felt like an actor performing a script I had memorized too well. My real thoughts remained hidden behind the polished version of myself that everyone expects. I was supposed to be composed, purposeful, unwavering, and yet, inside me, everything was shifting. Some nights, as I prepared for events or reviewed speeches, a sudden wave of longing would rise without warning. I would imagine him sitting across from me, as he used to, offering small pieces of advice in the plain, steady voice I used to find so grounding. I replayed moments when he celebrated even the smallest of my accomplishments. I remembered him waiting in the cold at the end of long days just to walk me home, saying nothing but letting his presence speak. These memories clung to me, pulling me back to a version of us untouched by disappointment. But then the truth of what we said to each other would return, as sharp and vivid as when it first happened, and I would feel myself closing off again, protecting the tender parts of me that still wished for something simple. There is a complexity in loving someone who has hurt you, especially when that person shaped your childhood with so much care. You cannot forget the tenderness, but you cannot erase the wounds either. I found myself divided between two forces, the desire to mend what had broken and the equally strong pull to preserve what remained of my self-respect. I tried to speak to others about it, though never fully. I would reach for vague explanations, hinting at tension, at misunderstandings, at the emotional exhaustion that came with trying to reconcile who I was becoming with who he wanted me to be. But the full truth seldom made its way into words. Some pain is too tightly woven into your identity to unravel easily. Still, life refused to slow down just because my heart felt heavy. Commitments continued. People expected things. Plans had to be fulfilled. So I learned to carry the ache quietly, keeping it folded behind all the layers of composure I had practiced for years. I did not realize I was withdrawing until someone close to me asked why my laughter had changed. They said it sounded more cautious, as if I was afraid of letting too much joy slip out at once. I denied it at first. I told them I was fine, simply tired, consumed by work. But later, alone in my room, their words echoed in my mind. I wondered when I had begun holding myself so tightly. When did I become afraid of being fully seen? Perhaps it was when the person I expected unconditional understanding from confessed that he did not understand me at all. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that comes when a parent sees you through a lens you cannot recognize. You begin questioning everything, your choices, your identity, even your worth. I have tried to unravel those thoughts gently, reminding myself that disagreements do not define the whole of a relationship. But even with that reasoning, the emotional storm remains. And I feel it most in the quietest moments, when there is no audience, no work to distract me, no duty compelling me forward. Sometimes I imagine walking up to his door. I picture myself stepping out of the car, heart pounding, rehearsing what I would say, that I am still me, still trying, still hoping we find our way back to each other. But then fear rises. The fear of hearing the same words again, or worse, a deeper silence. So I keep driving past, casting only a fleeting glance at the familiar house. I wonder if he senses my presence the way I sense his absence. I wonder if he ever leans on memories the way I do, using them as fragile bridges to cross the spaces between us. Even as my daily responsibilities pull me into future plans, this part of my past remains unresolved, like an unfinished sentence suspended in the air. And yet, something in me continues to believe that reconciliation is not impossible. Perhaps that is Narvi. Perhaps it is hope in its purest form. Or perhaps love has simply carved itself too deeply into me to vanish. As the months passed, the silence between us thickened. I stopped checking my messages for fear of disappointment. I stopped preparing explanations that would only collapse under the weight of unspoken feelings. But I never stopped waiting in some quiet corner of my mind. People think waiting is passive, but it isn't. It is its own kind of effort. It requires strength to hold space for someone who is not beside you. I never discussed the Thanksgiving night in detail with anyone. I felt a strange responsibility to protect him, to shield him from the judgment of those who would hear only the dramatic fragments, and not the years of devotion beneath them. You see, love complicates the urge to speak freely. Even when hurt, the heart reaches instinctively for understanding rather than blame. So I kept most of it tucked away, allowing only the edges of my experience to show. But the more I hid, the more distance grew between who I was publicly and who I was privately. Eventually I realized that it is impossible to pretend you are untouched by something that consumes you so deeply. That is why I chose to speak openly now, not for sympathy, not for validation, but because honesty is a kind of release. It is the only way to breathe again when silence has tightened around the words you never said. And although I do not know whether my father and I will resolve everything soon, I know that telling the truth, even quietly, even just to those who choose to listen, is the first step toward healing. I have been reflecting on the passages of life in which we stumble, not because we lack guidance, but because we outgrow the certainty that once sheltered us. My journey is no different. I have made choices that forced me to step outside his expectations. I have pursued paths that frightened him because they were unfamiliar. He feared I might lose myself. I feared losing him. That is where the conflict was born, not from malice, but from two hearts trying to protect their own visions of what safety meant. And the truth is, neither of us was wrong. We simply forgot to meet each other in the middle. When I think of him now, I no longer see only the anger or the disappointment. I see the human being beneath it all, struggling with his own insecurities, perhaps fearing that he failed me before I ever failed him. There is a vulnerability in parents we often overlook until we are old enough to recognize it. Understanding that has softened some of the resentment I once carried. But understanding does not immediately ease the ache. Emotion does not operate with logic. Love certainly does not, and so I move through each day carrying the duality of missing him and feeling the need to protect myself from further hurt. I do not know how long this chapter will last. I do not know when we will speak again, or what words will be exchanged when we do. But I do know that the bond we share, however strained, however burdened by miscommunication, has not disappeared. No matter how many times I try to ignore it, the connection remains woven into me like an invisible thread. Even when I try to pull away, it tugs softly, reminding me of where I came from, reminding me of who taught me to face the world with both strength and gentleness. And in that reminder lies a quiet, persistent hope that one day we will find our way back to each other. There came a moment, not long ago, when I sat alone in a quiet room long after midnight, feeling the weight of everything I had tried so hard to carry gracefully. The lights outside had dimmed, leaving the city wrapped in a soft darkness that made every sound feel amplified. I remember placing my hands on the table, steadying myself, and letting the full truth settle within me, without trying to push it away. For months I had lived between two worlds, the world where I fulfilled every expectation placed before me, moving with a poise learned through years of discipline, and the world of private sorrow in which I still searched for the courage to face the distance between my father and me. That night, I allowed myself to breathe without restraint. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be composed. I wasn't trying to be strong. I was simply human, acknowledging that growing up sometimes means losing pieces of the familiarity that once defined you. It struck me then how much of our relationship had been shaped by silence, not just the silence of recent months, but the unspoken expectations, the unasked questions, the hidden worries that both of us carried long before our conflict surfaced. I had always admired his strength so deeply that I never allowed myself to imagine his fear. He had always viewed me as capable, determined, and resilient, so he never considered that his approval was something I craved more than anything he could offer. Realizing that softened something inside me, I began to understand that the distance between us did not emerge from a lack of love, but from love expressed imperfectly. And once I recognized that, the resentment I held started to loosen, even if the pain remained. I went through our memories slowly, one by one, as if handling fragile objects long stored away. I saw him teaching me things I once thought insignificant, but now realize were acts of devotion. The way he insisted I learn to solve small problems on my own so I would never feel helpless. The way he stood quietly in the background during important moments, letting me shine without feeling overshadowed. The way he protected me from the harshness of the world, even when I believed I needed none of that protection. These reflections did not erase the words spoken on that painful night, but they placed them in a fuller context. They reminded me that even good people falter, even the strongest can break under the weight of expectations, and even the most devoted hearts can fail to express their love in ways that feel gentle. I could feel myself softening, not because I was excusing everything, but because forgiveness often begins with understanding. I began to wonder what I would say if he were sitting across from me right now. I imagine I would start quietly, without accusation or dramatic declarations. I would tell him that his love shaped me more than he realizes, that even when I walked my own path, I carried his strength with me. I would tell him that I am sorry too, not for following my dreams, but for not being brave enough to explain them without fear of disappointing him. I know he never meant to make me feel small. I know his anger came from a place of panic, from the fear of losing the child he once guided so closely. And I know that somewhere beneath his frustration is a tenderness he has always struggled to show openly. The truth is, his love is stitched into my character in ways neither of us can undo. It is present in the determination I bring to my work, in the care I offer to others, and in the resilience that keeps me steady even when I feel fragile. But perhaps the clearest sign of his influence is that I still hope, deeply, painfully, that we can begin again. That hope has followed me through every silent month, every moment in which I considered sending a message but lacked the courage, every time I stood outside his house with my heart pressed against my ribs. Hope is stubborn. It lingers even when logic says it should fade, but love often pays little attention to logic. I carry that hope gently now, the way one holds something that has been broken but can still be mended. I know that our reconciliation will not arrive instantly or easily. There are wounds that require time, and truths that must be spoken with honesty and patience. But I no longer fear the possibility of facing him. Instead, I fear what would happen if we never tried. In quiet moments, I imagine what our first conversation might be like. I imagine the silence that would settle between us, not heavy like before, but tentative, fragile, as if each of us were learning how to speak again. I imagine him clearing his throat, searching for words in the way he does when emotions rise behind his calm exterior. I imagine myself taking a breath, steadying my voice, fighting the urge to pretend everything is fine. And I imagine something else too. A moment where our eyes meet and all the years of connection surface, reminding us that no matter how long we have been apart, we were never truly separate. Maybe that moment will come sooner than I think. Maybe it will take longer, but I feel closer to it now than I have in months. There is something powerful about accepting the complexity of loving someone. It demands maturity, but also vulnerability. It requires acknowledging that people can love you deeply and still hurt you unknowingly. It calls for bravery, not the kind that stands tall before the world, but the kind that sits quietly with the truth and allows healing to unfold slowly. I have begun to speak to others more openly, just a little, about the importance of understanding our parents as individuals rather than infallible figures. We grow up believing they are strong simply because they must be. But adulthood reveals the hidden layers, their insecurities, their sacrifices, their fears. My father is no exception. This realization has allowed me to see him not just as the person who hurt me, but as a man who carried burdens I once could not comprehend. And when that understanding took root, everything began to shift. I do not know if he realizes how often I think of him. I do not know if he waits for me in his own quiet way, hoping I will knock on his door one day. I do not know if he replays our arguments, wishing he could undo the harshest words. But I know this love does not evaporate simply because it is not spoken. It remains, hidden beneath the noise, waiting for a moment to rise. This entire journey has taught me that healing is rarely linear. It is not a single moment of clarity, but a slow unraveling of pain and a gentle weaving of hope. Some days I feel confident that we will find our way back to each other. Other days, doubt creeps in, whispering that too much time has passed. Yet even on those days, something pushes me forward, a quiet certainty that the bond we share was not meant to end in silence. As I speak now, I feel the truth settling into place within me. I am ready for reconciliation. Not because I am free of hurt, and not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because love demands courage. I want to face the complexities, the imperfections, the raw honesty that rebuilding requires. I want to tell him that even in the moments when I tried to shield myself from the pain, I never stopped being his child. I want him to know that despite my independence, my responsibilities, my dreams, and the public life I lead, there is a part of me that still anchors itself in the certainty of who he is, and I want him to understand that I am willing to meet him halfway, even if I must walk slowly, even if I must walk with trembling hands. This is not the end of our story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one shaped by humility, by forgiveness, by a deeper understanding of what it means to love someone enough to face the discomfort of growth. I hope that one day, when we finally speak again, his voice will carry the warmth I grew up with. I hope my words will reach him with the sincerity I often struggled to express. I hope he will see the person I have become and not feel threatened by the distance between who I once was and who I am now. But most of all, I hope he knows that my heart has never closed to him. Even when anger clouded my judgment, even when silence stretched wider than I could bear, even when I felt overwhelmed by everything unsaid, the bond between us remained intact. It survived disappointment, it survived fear, it survived every unspoken apology, and it will survive until the day we stand face to face again, ready to build something stronger than what was lost. There is a kind of peace in accepting that truth. It does not erase the sadness, but it gives it purpose. It transforms pain into something meaningful, something that can guide us back to each other when the time is right. So as I speak these words to you now, I am no longer hiding behind composure. I am no longer pretending that everything is unblemished. I am simply being honest, letting vulnerability breathe in a way I once feared. Perhaps this is what growth feels like. Not the absence of hurt, but the willingness to move toward healing anyway. And when the moment comes, when I finally gather enough courage to approach his door or pick up the phone, I know that whatever happens, I will speak with truth. I will carry love in my voice, not because everything is perfect, but because love is the only thing that has endured through every fracture. In the end, he is my father. Nothing will ever change that. And no matter how winding the path back to each other may be, I will walk it with hope, with patience, and with the certainty that love, even when wounded, still knows the way home.